And this was SS from Hyderabad, India. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Can you please explain the act of reciting Quran for the dead and the correct opinion regarding it?
Question once more comes from Hyderabad, India. Could you please explain the proper way of reciting Quran for the dead and the correct or the strongest opinion concerning that? طيب. We have an issue, and that is donating good deeds to dead people, or doing things on the behalf of dead people, or helping out dead people with something that we do for ourselves, something that they benefit from and feel some type of warmth or comfort from, such as giving sadaqah. I give you $100, I pay $1,000 to an orphanage, not for my own self, but with the intention of my dead uncle. Or I pray all night long, making dua to Allah to forgive my dead uncle. Me standing or sitting in prayer, holding my hands up, that's effort, that's energy, that's a great amount of sacrifice. And I'm not doing it for myself, but I'm asking Allah for my uncle. I could spend that time making dua for myself, but I'm asking for my uncle. Or making hajj on my deceased uncle's behalf, or umrah on his behalf. Nah, that's one thing. Or is it permissible for me to read the Quran and read an entire juz and say, I give my rewards to the Prophet? I make this hajj on behalf of the Prophet of Islam. I make, and even though he made hajj already, but I'm doing an extra hajj for him. Or I'm going to give this sadaqah, I'm going to slaughter this animal in the name of Allah, for Allah. It's not shirk. But the food, the bank will be on behalf of this dead Muslim. Is that permissible? Or is it restricted to what I just mentioned of prayer, sadaqah, and dua, and the mandatory hajj and umrah, things like this? Alright? Certain types of fasting. Alright? With regards to a person owed fasting. Different details with regards to the hadith, man mata wa alayhi siyamun sama anhu waliyuhu. Alright? Al-Muhim is that one group of ulama, they say, is that donating deeds to the deceased is restricted. Is restricted to that which has been mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah. And that which has been mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah are the things I just explained. Making dua for them. Giving sadaqah on their behalf. Making obligatory hajj or umrah on their behalf. And certain types of fasting that were still on them when they died. Everyone understand this? Everybody clear on this or not? And that's what? That's it. And others, they say rather anything that you do of good can be for a deceased Muslim. Anything you do of good for them. So the ulama of Islam, they differ on this issue. There is no doubt the safest thing to do is to stick with that which is textual. Al-mansus alayh. Is that which is mentioned in the text of the Quran and the Sunnah. And that's the first group of ulama. The sadaqah, the obligatory hajj, certain types of fasting, right? And things like this. But to just open it up and you can do anything for a dead Muslim, even though many ulama, they take that view, I would say stick with the first view. Stick with the first view. And there are many reasons why you should stick with the first view. As far as reciting the Quran to the dead, didn't the Prophet do it? Did the Sahaba do it? One may say that the dead person, he can benefit from it. The hadith clearly states that when the people walk away from the graveyard, they can hear the footsteps. A person hears the footsteps. And there's some I thought of many of the Salaf, Ibn Rajab and others, they've quoted of some of the benefits that some Muslims get in their graves from those who visit them. Going to them, making dua for them, to Allah, for them. And someone who's righteous, who cares about them, and are they doing well in their graves, and things like this. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to now recite the Quran to the dead with the intention of him hearing it. Do the dead hear? The ulama, they differ over that. Can the dead hear the living people or not? They differ on that issue. But it wasn't something which was known and practiced to the Sahaba on a large scale, in which Abu Bakr as-Siddiq will go to the Prophet's grave and recite the Quran. Or Umar radiallahu anhu will recite the Quran. Do we have that information? If we do, then perhaps. And if we don't, then the lies no best. The best thing is to stay away from it. Just like the hadith about splitting the twig over the two graves. The Prophet ﷺ, he took it and he split it in half. Not a twig, it was actually fresh from the date palm stalk. فَشَقَّهُ شِقَيْنِ. He broke it in half. فَغَرَزَ فِي كُلِّ وَاحِدٍ. And he placed half of it in each grave. And they asked him why. And And he says, لَعَلَّهُ يُخَفَّفُ عَنْهُمَا مَا لَمْ يَيْبَسَا. He says, perhaps the Allah will protect him from the punishment of the grave as long as it remains green. As long as it remains green. So the hadith is in Sahihain that the Prophet, he did this for the deceased people. So does it mean that I can now go to a graveyard and take a date palm stalk and stick it into the grave as a means of asking Allah to protect him from adhab al-qabr? Some of the ulama of Islam have the opinion that you should do that and you can do that. But did the Sahaba do it as a whole? Was it a well-known practice as a whole? Obviously, we know the answer is no. So therefore, you shouldn't do it. You should not do it. So therefore, reading the Quran on the dead, to the dead, for the dead, should be avoided. It's best not to do it bi'idhnillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. As far as the hadith that says, اقرأوا على موتاكم ياسين, read Surah Yasin to those who are dead, then there's a long discussion regarding that hadith. The first point, obviously, is that the hadith is not authentic. Al-Qawl al-Rajih al-Sahih. The correct view is that the hadith is not authentic. That's number one. Number two is that, does that hadith mean those who are dead? Or does that hadith mean those who are living and they're about to die? Someone on their deathbed. Like the hadith that says, لَقِنُوا مَوْتَاكُمْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Hadith says, teach those who are dying to say La ilaha illallah. But the hadith doesn't say dying. The hadith says, لَقِنُوا مَوْتَاكُمْ. Those who are actually what? Dead. And the interpretation of the hadith is those who are what? On the deathbed. So what does a dead person benefit from me saying, say La ilaha illallah? And what does the dead person benefit from Yasin? And he's dead. Or is it a benefit from Surah Yasin when they're what? About to die. So therefore, there are many different ins and outs and many different loopholes and the argument of those who say that you should recite the Quran for the dead and to the dead. So therefore, it should be avoided. And some of it could be permissible, but it's best to avoid. And obviously, some of it is clear bid'ah. It's clear bid'ah. And some of it may be shirk and kufr. If you have the intention of giving the good deeds or doing the good deeds for the person in the grave. And we know that the ulama of Islam, they say that there's a conveyor belt. There's a system, there's a process. That something starts off as, it's possible, muhtamal. And then the next thing you know, it becomes mukhalafa. Something that's not necessarily a bid'ah, but it's not from the sunnah. And then the third step is that thing becomes what? A bid'ah. And then the final step, or after that, it becomes what? Shirk. It starts off slaughtering for Allah at the grave. For Allah at the grave. And then as time goes on, and ignorance prevails, and the people that become more and more laxed, I'm now slaughtering for the grave. For the person in the grave, and I'm no longer slaughtering for Allah. So be mindful. And Allah Azza wa Jalla, He clearly mentions that. إِنَّمَا اسْتَزَلَّهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ. He says that indeed the shaitan has istazallahum. He caused them to slip. Shaitan can make you what? Slip. So be mindful of that. So it should be avoided. Reciting the Quran for the dead, to the dead, should be avoided. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best. Make dua for them. Pray for them. Give charity on their behalf. That's more than enough to keep you busy. Bidnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And most importantly, if that person was righteous, and if they were pious, and they taught you the Quran, or influenced you to recite the Quran, then you reciting the Quran for yourself, bidnillah ta'ala, they'll get some of it. They'll get some of it. Inshallah. And Allah